Jujutsu Kaisen season finale ended with a bang a few weeks back, and I know that if you binged it or watched it weekly, you're missing your dose of curse-fueled adrenaline that came from following the JJK trio as they battled curses, each other, and curse users over the course of a heart-pumping 24 episodes. Now while we wait for the prequel film to finish production and the second season to be announced, I think it's time to take a step back, breathe, and look at our characters once more as we prepare for more Jujutsu Kaisen goodness in the months and years to come. And to get started, I think it's only appropriate that we look at the woman who completely stole the show in the final episode of Season 1, that being Nobara Kugisaki. But before we get started, guys, as you can tell, this is a small channel, and getting noticed out here on the high seas of YouTube is nigh impossible without the good graces of the YouTube algorithm. So if you're here, like anime, and interested in supporting small creators, please consider dropping a like, a sub, and leaving a comment down below. It just helps push the video out to more people and would really be appreciated. It feels weird to say this stuff because I'd really rather just focus on making videos and doing that. But these calls to action are shown to work and help channels grow. So yeah, thanks guys in advance for the support. Okay guys, with that out of the way, let's just get right into it. We're going to cover the entire first season, no manga, I don't read it, no spoilers from the manga or anything like that, but that's your warning. So here we go, Nobara Kugisaki, the Girl of Steel. Nobara's character is interesting, as she may be the most well fleshed out character introduced so far among the trio, consisting of herself, Fushiguro Megumi, and Itadori Yuji. Yuji, for being, quote, the hero of the story, maintains a fairly ambiguous past outside of anything not immediately introduced to us in episode 1, and Fushiguro, whose background really begins to be understood starting during the death painting arc, aka the last 3 episodes of season 1, maintains a path of intrigue and interest that had really only been alluded to briefly in offhand comments throughout most of the previous 21 episodes. Nobara, on the other hand, gives us backstory and plenty to chew on in her introductory episode, Girl of Steel. Nobara's introduction is both bold and fierce. She joins the team as the loudest and most outspoken of the other first-year students, and despite having just met them, isn't afraid to show her feelings and speak her version of the truth. Fushiguro and Itadori, to her, are 2 goofy boys not meant to really be taken seriously, and is quick to show us that despite being special characters to the show's narrative, are nothing more to her than classmates. She teases them, berates them, and is generally, at least at first glance, difficult to get along with, at least compared to the laid-back and friendly Yuji and the aloof but caring Fushiguro. However, despite that outward projection of independence and assertiveness, comes nuance and duality to a character that otherwise seems anything but subtle. Nobara's flashback to her hometown, located somewhere in the rural rice fields of Iwate, Japan, don't clue us into her parents or home, her upbringing, or school life. Instead, we're very deliberately introduced to a first grader version of Nobara, maybe 5 or 6 years old, who meets and becomes friends with a young woman named Saori who moved here from Tokyo. Over the course of the year, Nobara and Saori develop a kind of sisterly bond. Nobara comes to learn about life from the city from Saori, learning that different treats and clothes and entirely different ways of thinking exist outside of her hometown. And Saori is warm and gentle with Nobara, and she shares her experiences liberally. There's a level of familial love here that, as far as we know, may really only exist in this capacity with Saori, as Nobara's exclusion of anyone else from this memory shows how truly important Saori is to her. That's why when the villagers ostracize Saori, shunning her from life in the village and bullying her into leaving for Tokyo, Nobara realizes that the people in her town, despite being her people, acted with judgment and hatred towards a person that Nobara felt only compassion from. The villagers reacted with disdain for whom they believed was looking down on them, the big city girl with big city ideas, and as a result revealed their bigoted nature to an evolving Nobara, who years later, in the aftermath of a battle that nearly cost her her life, reflects and says, "If I'd stayed there, I would have been as good as dead," acknowledging that this worldview would have stopped her from living a life the way that she wants to live, and experiencing the world that Saori began to reveal to her. Saori's time in Nobara's village was small, but her impact changed Nobara unequivocally, and in part explains why Nobara's justification for becoming a Jujutsu sorcerer makes sense. What seems like a shallow and uninspired reason at first, especially compared to Yuji, I mean, he even remarks that not everyone needs a good reason, is actually part of a much larger exploration of Nobara's values and a misunderstanding that Yuji and likely viewers might miss if they take Nobara's words and Yuji's reaction at face value. She rejects the life that would have molded her to hate outsiders like Saori and embrace one that allows her to live and explore life to the fullest. Freedom is really why Nobara comes to the city, and in that freedom comes the hope that she one day soon might meet Saori again. The truth is, Nobara is open-minded to the world, and perhaps understands the nature of things better than even Saori does. Nobara balances a rougher upbringing the most, battling curses in the countryside and developing an attitude that reflects that. She's mocking while she fights, she's quick to anger, and she's tougher than she seems. Conversely, she's outwardly interested in routine hobbies like fashion, eating, and cultivating her looks, and she is obviously confident in her appearance. She approaches a modeling agent off the street for a deal in Tokyo, remarking that her good looks are intimidating and losing her cool when she gets hit in the... During the Kyoto Goodwill event arc, the students of the Tokyo and Kyoto Jujutsu High School branches come together to compete in a competition to vie for promotion. Students who perform well here have the chance to move into a higher Jujutsu ranking and qualify for larger missions. During this competition, Yuji is targeted by Principal Gakuganji and students of the Kyoto High branch for being Sukuna's vessel, and as a result raise the already high stakes of this competition to truly astronomical proportions. Plus, this happens.
Time without humans. Please die and become sages.
While the boys of our trio are off fighting monstrous opponents, those being both human and curse alike, Nobara's clash happens between her and another student, Momo. This fight is smaller in stake and scope than that of her classmates, and isn't even really all that long of an encounter. However, the fight illuminates more about the larger Jujutsu world than either of Yuji's or Megumi's encounters, which brings us back to here. Momo raises an interesting question about the role of men and women in Jujutsu society, and mirrors a question that is often posed in our own. In a society of supposed equality, what are the standards that we hold each other? After all, a scar is a badge of honor on a man, but may as well be a curse on a woman, according to Momo. And if that's the case, are women, especially women sorcerers, supposed to balance the burden of being beautiful, delicate, and poised while also functioning as warriors on the battlefield? I mean, this is a fair complaint of Momo's, and to her point, her experiences and relationships with people like Mai, who has been cast out by the powerful Zenin family for lacking raw curse potential and for being a woman, only help to prove her point. Nobara's answer to this is shockingly simple.
うるせえよ。不幸なら何しても許されんのかよ。じゃあ何か？逆に恵まれた人間が後ろ指刺されりゃ満足か。そうやって沙織ちゃんは。そう。これから呪おうとしてるバカがどんな人間か。少しは考えたことあんのかよ。完璧も理不尽も答える義務がどこにある。てめえの人生は仕事か。数例上。
Nobara recognizes the problems that Mai has faced, and she's likewise experienced some of it herself. The difference is that when Momo talks about the Zenin family, Nobara sees the villagers who cast out Saori. When Momo talks about hating Maki and passing judgment on Yuji, Nobara sees the villagers who cast out Saori. The same baseless scorn, judgment, and duplicitous nature of things exists here, just like it did in Nobara's home village, and to her, there is no greater sin. Before finishing the fight, Nobara asserts that she loves herself when she's beautiful, and she loves herself when she's fighting. She accepts herself completely and loves herself despite what may look like two irreconcilable halves of the same whole. Nobara's fight then is really about the strength of her character. It's a reaction to the standards that women and men unnecessarily put on themselves and each other, and in some ways a critique of how many women in anime are written. Why not both? Who says we need to have such unrealistic or absurd demands? Why not just be yourself, totally, unabashedly, and shamelessly? And that is what I think Nobara's point really is. The fight ends with Mai's surprise attack on Nobara before herself being stopped by Maki. See, all the women here kind of come into play, and it's actually a pretty powerful moment given the context of this conversation with Momo. And the anime too seemingly asserts Nobara's stance, just this time through Maki, and ultimately I think holds this side up as the ideological victor. Nobara, until now, has basically only fought off a lower level curse and nearly KO'd Momo, despite having one of the coolest and arguably most devastating abilities among her fellow students. Her power is really interesting, and I did a whole video here where I dug into her abilities as it relates to Japan and curses in general. You can watch that video if you're interested. The video is long, but I think well worth the watch, especially if you like history, lore, and creepy stuff. Needless to say, Nobara's ability comes from imbuing a portion of her enemy with her own curse energy, allowing for devastating, immediate, and inescapable bursts of power across distance. Despite this, it's Yuji and then Megumi who get most of the battle attention, with Yuji getting almost all of it up until now. That's when, sitting around Fushiguro, aka Megumi, aka Fushiguro, Fushiguro, Megumi, Megumi, Fushiguro, I'm like using their names like back and forth. They're all eating a fat slice of pizza. Megumi declares that he won't fall behind Yuji and Nobara, and Nobara follows up saying not to move the conversation forward without her. At this point, I remember thinking that they would both really need to do something big if they're going to live up to the level of hype and potential that Yuji was already showing, and they pulled it off. While investigating a series of deaths near Megumi's old junior high school, the trio learns that the victims' deaths can be traced back to a point of origin, that being Yasuhachi Bridge, a haunted location near the school, and with Sukuna's awakening at the start of the show, now plays host to a curse that contains one of Sukuna's fingers. After beginning the fight, Nobara is separated from the group and put face to face with another cursed spirit, Eso, and later joined by both Yuji and Eso's younger brother, Kechizu. During this fight, Nobara's strength of will and confidence are on full display. Any doubt regarding her ability as a Jujutsu sorcerer is easily put to bed as she and Yuji methodically tear apart both Eso and Kechizu, showing off supreme control of her abilities, unshakable trust in herself, as well as her partnership with Yuji, and a level of savagery that I think Gojo sensed in her back in episode 3. Her relentlessness in battle confirms her thoughts from her encounter with Momo. Nobara loves fighting. She loves kicking ass as much as either of the boys, and as long as she's being true to herself, she can push herself past any limit.
まだこっちは見せてなかったわね。かんざし。
She launches a coordinated black flash assault. With Yuji, she inflicts her own curse technique on herself to target the villains of this arc, and she does it all with an icy level-headedness that would have rivaled any villain. At the end of the encounter, bruised and battered but alive, Nobara and Yuji make their way back to Megumi. During the encounter, they realize that the two brothers were flesh and blood curse users, making their victory more akin to murder than just dispelling a curse. Yuji, true to his nature, grapples with the reality of this, despite it being truly in self-defense, while Nobara's view is calculated. Cool. She recognizes the reality of their position, that inevitably they may cross paths with people and curses alike where there is no peaceful solution. And if it comes to that, she'll protect the people she's welcomed into her life. After all, There are only so many seats available in her life, and she won't be swayed by the people not at the table.
冷たい
And to answer that question, I think each person would really need to ask themselves what line they're willing to cross and judge based on their own morality. Interestingly, Yuji and Nobara don't come to a conclusion as to which view is right or wrong. They simply understand that they were accomplices in the murder and death of these two individuals, no matter how cruel or evil they might have been. And they're left to reconcile with that. They're left to reconcile with the results of what happened that evening. And so, with that, the season ends. It's left off on a happy note, and season 1 is all summed up. And 8 pages of writing later, we now have kind of a way to wrap up everything that we saw through Nobara's eyes. And despite the length of the video, I think there was a lot that I still didn't have time to touch on. There's a lot about Nobara that I could have included, but just because it wasn't a huge long segment of the show, I decided to leave out, and little tiny itty bitty silly stuff, like all the random jokes they throw in, that I think added to her character, but not anything enough to really kind of dig into here. So guys, let me know what you think of Nobara in the comment section down below, how you think her character might have changed or stayed the same. I think you could argue either way. And just so you guys know, I'm working on another script at the moment and hope to have it out soon. And then I'll be working on the next character in this little mini series I'm doing, since I'm going to be approaching everybody from the main cast and doing kind of a character breakdown, really of the main trio of characters here, that being Nobara, Yuji, and Fushiguro. And I'll be doing, I think, Megumi and his shadow powers next. It's just kind of a very cool thing that I want to get to. So guys, thanks again for watching. Don't forget to leave a like, and I'll see you guys in the next one.